The skipper wanted me to be skipper if anything happened to the skipper. And I'm gonna be skipper because that's the way the skipper wanted it. Any questions?
From secret insults to FCC chairmen hidden in boat names to deadly lion attacks on set, the seemingly innocent 3-hour tour hides some truly bizarre secrets. The beloved sitcom's production was filled with broken bones, Coast Guard confusion, and a future Star Wars composer's rejected theme song. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Gilligan's Island. Fact 1. Future Star Wars composer created rejected theme.
Just one other thing you ought to do, to thine own self be true.
Oh, I just think he's wonderful.
I think he's twins.
Before John Williams became famous for creating the epic musical scores for Star Wars, Jaws, and Indiana Jones, he was a young television composer working under the name Johnny Williams, who wrote the original theme song for Gilligan's Island that nobody ever got to hear. In 1963, when creator Sherwood Schwartz was putting together the pilot episode for his new sitcom about shipwrecked castaways, he hired Williams to compose what would become a calypso-style theme song. This original version was completely different from the famous Ballad of Gilligan's Isle that everyone knows and loves today. Williams's composition had a distinctly Caribbean flavor that matched the tropical island setting, and it was actually performed by Schwartz himself, doing his best impression of a calypso singer named Sir Lancelot. The original pilot theme song was also longer than the version that eventually made it to television, and the lyrics were entirely different as well. Instead of the detailed storytelling approach that explained exactly how the castaways ended up stranded, Williams's version focused more on creating a general tropical atmosphere. Even more interesting is that the original song described their voyage as lasting 6 hours instead of the famous 3-hour tour that became part of television history. However, when CBS picked up the show for a full season run in 1964, the network executives decided they wanted something that would better explain the show's premise to viewers who might be tuning in for the first time. They felt that Williams' calypso theme, while catchy, didn't do enough to set up the story and introduce the characters. So Schwartz worked with composer George Weil to create the new Ballad of Gilligan's Isle that became one of the most recognizable television theme songs ever made. Williams went on to compose incidental music for the show's first season before being replaced by Gerald Fried, but by then he was already on his way to becoming one of Hollywood's most celebrated film composers. Fact 2. The SS Minnow was named as an insult.
Who am I?
The professor.
She's fine.
Who are they?
Gilligan and Skipper.
She's okay.
And of course you know who you are.
I'm Ginger.
She's sick.
The SS Minnow wasn't just named after a small fish, as most people assume, but was actually creator Sherwood Schwartz's passive-aggressive jab at Newton Minnow, the Federal Communications Commission chairman, who Schwartz believed had destroyed the creative freedom of television. In May of 1961, Newton Minnow gave a famous speech at the National Association of Broadcasters Convention, where he harshly criticized the television industry, calling American television programming a vast wasteland filled with violence, boring game shows, and what he called formulaic comedies. Minnow challenged television executives to actually sit down and watch their own programming for an entire day, suggesting they would be horrified by the low quality of what they were putting on the air. While Minnow's speech was intended to improve television quality, Schwartz saw it as an attack on writers and producers like himself who were trying to create entertainment for regular people. The speech gave networks much more power to control what got made and how it got made, which meant that individual creators had less freedom to develop their own ideas. When Schwartz began working on Gilligan's Island in 1963, he was already frustrated by what he saw as the network's new dictatorial approach to television production. So when it came time to name the doomed boat that would strand his 7 castaways on a deserted island, Schwartz decided to get his revenge by naming it after the man he held responsible for ruining television. He spelled it Minnow instead of Minnow to make it look like it was named after the fish, adding an extra letter to avoid any potential legal issues. Ironically, when Newton Minow eventually learned about the boat's name, he wasn't offended at all and actually thought it was quite funny. The two men even began a friendly correspondence that lasted for years, with Minow apparently enjoying his unexpected connection to television history. Fact 3. Jerry Van Dyke called it the worst script ever.
Are you sure positively you're stuck?
I'm sure positively I'm stuck.
Are you definitely positively sure you're stuck?
I'm definitely positively sure I'm stuck.
Jerry Van Dyke, the younger brother of famous comedian Dick Van Dyke, was actually Sherwood Schwartz's first choice to play the lovable but bumbling first mate Gilligan. But Van Dyke rejected the role so harshly that he called it the worst thing I'd ever read. In 1964, Van Dyke was already establishing himself as a comedian and actor, having appeared in several films and made guest appearances on his brother's popular sitcom, The Dick Van Dyke Show. When the Gilligan's Island script landed on his desk, Van Dyke was considering multiple television projects and had several opportunities to choose from. However, after reading Schwartz's concept about 7 people stranded on a deserted island, Van Dyke was completely unimpressed and found the entire premise ridiculous and inane. Van Dyke turned down the role not just once, but twice, even when his agent tried to push him toward accepting it. He didn't want to be part of an ensemble cast where he would have to share screen time with 6 other actors, preferring instead to find a starring vehicle where he could be the main focus like his successful older brother. Van Dyke also believed that the show's silly premise and comedic situations were beneath him and would never find an audience with television viewers. Instead of taking the Gilligan role, Van Dyke chose to star in a sitcom called My Mother the Car, which premiered in 1965 and told the bizarre story of a man whose deceased mother's soul gets reincarnated into a 1928 automobile that talks to him and gives him advice. The show was immediately panned by critics and audiences alike, lasting only 1 season and earning the distinction of being frequently cited as one of the worst television shows ever made. Meanwhile, Bob Denver stepped into the role of Gilligan and turned it into one of the most beloved characters in television history, while Van Dyke's career choice became a cautionary tale about judging scripts too quickly. Fact 4. Coast Guard received rescue telegrams for fictional castaways.
Skipper, did I do that?
No, Gilligan, I just felt like wearing the door tonight.
When Gilligan's Island first started airing in 1964, some viewers became so emotionally invested in the plight of the 7 stranded castaways that they actually contacted the United States Coast Guard demanding to know why these poor people hadn't been rescued yet. The Coast Guard received a handful of angry telegrams from concerned citizens who genuinely believed that Gilligan, the skipper, and their 5 passengers were real people who had been abandoned on a deserted island somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. These well-meaning viewers couldn't understand why the government wasn't doing anything to help these obviously distressed individuals who were clearly in need of immediate assistance. Creator Sherwood Schwartz was completely dumbfounded when he learned about these telegrams from Coast Guard officials. He later wrote about his amazement at the situation, wondering how anyone could believe the show was real when it had such obvious fictional elements, including a laugh track that played during comedic moments. Schwartz asked himself who these viewers thought was laughing at the survivors if the situation was actually happening in real life. The fact that people were taking the show seriously enough to contact federal authorities demonstrated just how convincing the performances were and how effectively the show created the illusion of real people dealing with genuine survival challenges. The actors had managed to make their characters so believable and sympathetic that some viewers forgot they were watching a television comedy and instead saw what appeared to be a documentary about people in distress. This confusion also highlighted how television was still a relatively new medium in the 1960s, and not all viewers were completely familiar with the difference between scripted entertainment and actual news coverage. The Coast Guard had to politely explain to these concerned citizens that Gilligan's Island was a fictional television show and that no real rescue operation was necessary. Fact 5. Bob Denver nearly died in lion attack.
Professor, what's a felis Leo?
Well, that's the zoological classification for lion.
Oh.
Oh, there must have been a lion in this crate.
Bob Denver came dangerously close to being killed during the filming of one episode when a real lion that was being used as a prop suddenly turned aggressive and lunged directly at him while cameras were rolling. The scene was supposed to show Gilligan discovering that he was trapped inside a hut with a lion, and the production team had brought in what they thought was a well-trained animal along with its professional handler. However, Dawn Wells, who played Mary Ann, had already noticed some warning signs that this particular lion might not be as docile as everyone hoped, observing that even the animal's experienced trainer was covered in fresh claw marks from previous encounters. When the cameras started rolling and Denver was supposed to react to seeing the lion in the hut with him, the animal suddenly decided to leap toward the actor instead of following its training. Denver's immediate instinctual reaction was to start frantically karate chopping at the charging lion, which probably wouldn't have been very effective against a full-grown predator that could weigh several hundred pounds. Fortunately, the lion's trainer was paying close attention and had quick reflexes, immediately jumping into action and tackling the lion in midair before it could reach Denver. The trainer managed to wrestle the animal to the ground and get it under control, preventing what could have easily turned into a fatal mauling on a television set. After the terrifying incident was over, Denver later recalled that the whole experience made his hair stand on end, and he remarked that even the supposedly professional animal trainer had claw marks covering his arms and body from working with this particular lion. The near miss demonstrated just how dangerous it was for television productions in the 1960s to use wild animals as props without the extensive safety protocols that would be required today. Fact 6. Alan Hale Jr. filmed with broken arm for weeks.
Gilligan, you can't fly. It's impossible.
I can't?
No!
Alan Hale Jr., who played the beloved skipper on Gilligan's Island, was such a dedicated professional that he secretly filmed for 3 weeks with a broken arm rather than risk delaying the production schedule or letting down his fellow cast members. During the filming of the first season, Hale was performing a stunt that required him to fall out of a tree when something went wrong with the safety preparations. He was supposed to land on a protective pad that had been placed on the ground to cushion his fall, but he missed the safety equipment and landed directly on the hard ground, breaking his arm in the process. Instead of immediately reporting the injury to the producers or seeking medical attention, Hale made the decision to keep the broken bone completely secret from everyone on set. He was worried that if the production team knew about his injury, they would have to shut down filming while he recovered, which would cost the studio money and potentially put other people's jobs at risk. For the next 3 weeks, Hale continued to perform all of his regular duties as the skipper, including scenes that required significant physical activity and strength. This meant he had to carry heavy bags of coconuts as props while his arm was broken, and he even had to lift and carry Bob Denver during scenes where the skipper was supposed to physically handle Gilligan, all while enduring considerable pain. The truth about Hale's injury only came out at the end of season wrap party, when he casually mentioned to creator Sherwood Schwartz that he was happy he could finally get his arm properly treated. When a shocked Schwartz asked what he meant, Hale explained that he had been working with a broken bone for weeks, leaving the show's creator amazed at the actor's dedication and toughness. Fact 7. The lagoon was only 4 feet, deep and filthy.
Rock is because you were so scared by that dreadful lightning. The rock is only in your mind.
No, it's not. It's right in my hand, see?
The famous tropical lagoon where the castaways spent so much time swimming and boating was actually a shallow man-made water tank at CBS Studio Center that was only 4 feet deep at its deepest point and became absolutely disgusting between filming seasons. The lagoon was constructed as part of the studio's backlot, specifically for the show, but it wasn't designed with any kind of filtration or heating system that would keep the water clean and pleasant for the actors who had to spend time in it. During the off-season, when filming wasn't taking place, the lagoon would sit uncovered and exposed to the elements for months at a time, collecting leaves, debris, and other organic matter that would decompose and make the water brackish and foul-smelling. By the time the cast and crew returned for each new season of filming, the water had become so stagnant and revolting that it was nearly unbearable for anyone to enter. The actors had to repeatedly complain to the production staff and studio executives before anyone would authorize the expense of draining the entire lagoon and refilling it with fresh, clean water that was actually safe for human contact. The shallow depth of the lagoon also created practical problems during filming, since the actors had to be very careful about their movements to maintain the illusion that they were in a natural body of water rather than a glorified swimming pool. Bob Denver often had to wear a wetsuit underneath his signature red shirt and white pants because the water temperature was frequently quite cold, especially during the fall and winter months when much of the filming took place. The lagoon's location, about half a mile from a busy interstate highway, also meant that the sounds of rush hour traffic would often interrupt takes and cause delays in the filming schedule. Fact 8. Filming stopped due to JFK's assassination.
Apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The filming of Gilligan's Island's original pilot episode was dramatically interrupted by one of the most tragic events in American history, when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963, forcing the production to shut down just one day before they were scheduled to complete their work. The cast and crew had been filming the pilot episode in Hawaii throughout November of 1963, and they had planned to wrap up their final day of shooting on November 23rd at a local naval base in Honolulu Harbor. This last day was supposed to include important scenes showing the SS Minnow departing on its fateful 3-hour tour, with the boat sailing out of the harbor before the storm that would eventually strand the 7 passengers on the deserted island. However, on the morning of November 22nd, the cast and crew learned about President Kennedy's assassination while they were on set in Hawaii. Between takes, everyone gathered around radios to listen to the devastating news bulletins coming from Dallas. And the entire production came to a complete standstill as the shocking events unfolded. The government immediately closed the naval base where they were supposed to film the next day, along with all other military facilities across the country as a security precaution during the national crisis. The production team couldn't return to finish filming at the naval base until early December, nearly 2 weeks after the original schedule. As a result of this delay, there's actually a permanent reminder of that tragic day visible in the opening credits of the first season of Gilligan's Island. Sharp-eyed viewers can spot an American flag flying at half-staff in the background as the SS Minnow sails out of Honolulu Harbor, a somber tribute to the fallen president that remains part of television history. Fact 9. Show creator himself sang the pilot.
The next 2 people are millionaires. They got no worries, they got no cares. They climb aboard and they step inside.
Theme song Sherwood Schwartz, the creator and producer of Gilligan's Island, took on the unusual role of vocalist for the original pilot episode theme song, doing his best impression of a popular calypso singer named Sir Lancelot to give the show its tropical Caribbean flavor. When Schwartz was putting together the pilot episode in 1963, he wanted the opening theme to capture the exotic island atmosphere that would define the entire series. The calypso style of music was perfect for this tropical setting, with its distinctive rhythms and Caribbean influences that would immediately transport viewers to a South Pacific paradise. However, instead of hiring a professional calypso performer to record the theme song, Schwartz decided to handle the vocals himself. Sir Lancelot was a well-known calypso singer of the era who had a very distinctive vocal style that was immediately recognizable to audiences familiar with Caribbean music. Schwartz attempted to mimic Sir Lancelot's singing technique and accent, trying to recreate that authentic calypso sound that would make viewers believe they were hearing genuine island music rather than a television theme song recorded in a Hollywood studio. The original pilot theme song that Schwartz performed was completely different from the famous Ballad of Gilligan's Isle that everyone knows today. It had different lyrics, a different melody, and a much more laid-back Caribbean feeling that focused on creating atmosphere rather than telling the specific story of how the castaways ended up stranded on their desert island. When CBS picked up the show for a full season, the network decided they wanted a theme song that would better explain the premise to new viewers. So Schwartz worked with composer George Weil to create the narrative-driven ballad that became one of television's most memorable theme songs, leaving his original calypso performance as a forgotten piece of television history. Fact 10. The characters were designed as 7 deadly sins.
Gilligan, are you frightened?
No,
You're not?
I'm too scared to be frightened.
What appeared to be a simple comedy about stranded castaways actually had a much deeper and darker meaning, as creator Sherwood Schwartz later admitted that he deliberately designed each of the 7 characters to represent one of the classic 7 deadly sins from Christian theology. In a 2008 interview with NPR, Schwartz confirmed what many fans had long suspected about the hidden symbolism behind his seemingly innocent sitcom. The professor, with his vast knowledge and constant need to show off his intelligence, represented pride, always believing he had the answers to every problem the castaways faced. Thurston Howell III, the millionaire who was obsessed with his wealth and possessions even while stranded on a deserted island, clearly embodied greed in his every action and conversation. Ginger Grant, the glamorous movie star who used her beauty and sexuality to try to get what she wanted from the other castaways, was the obvious representation of lust, while Mary Ann represented envy because she was constantly jealous of Ginger's beauty and sophistication. The skipper embodied both anger, with his frequent outbursts of temper and violent hat-hitting of Gilligan, and gluttony, represented by his large size and love of food, while Mrs. Howell represented sloth because she never lifted a finger to help with any of the escape plans or survival efforts. This left Gilligan himself, and some fans have developed an even more sinister theory about his role in the cosmic drama. Since Gilligan always wore red clothing and was the one who consistently sabotaged every escape attempt, keeping the other 6 characters perpetually trapped on the island, many viewers theorize that he wasn't representing sloth as Schwartz intended, but was actually Satan himself, deliberately preventing the sinful castaways from ever leaving their island prison, which represented a form of purgatory or hell. Fact 11. Natalie Schaefer lied about her age by 12 years.
Lovey, if anything happens, I want to thank you for 15 of the happiest years a man ever had.
Thurston, we've been married 20.
I know, but the last 5 years have been a little shaky.
Natalie Schaefer, who played the wealthy and pampered Mrs. Lovey Howell on Gilligan's Island, was so determined to keep her real age secret that she maintained an elaborate lie about being born in 1912 when she was actually born 12 years earlier in 1900, and she kept this deception going for her entire life. When Schaefer auditioned for the role of Mrs. Howell in the early 1960s, she was already in her 60s, but desperately wanted to appear younger to improve her chances of getting hired for the part. Age discrimination was a serious problem for actresses in Hollywood, especially for women who were being considered for roles that required them to be attractive and glamorous, even if they were playing characters who were supposed to be middle-aged socialites. Schaefer's commitment to maintaining this false birth year went far beyond just her professional career and became a deeply personal obsession that affected all aspects of her life. She not only lied to casting directors, producers, and her fellow actors, but she also kept her true age hidden from her own husband and even her closest personal friends who had known her for decades. The actress was so secretive about her real birth year that she reportedly even hid the truth from people who would have had no professional reason to care about her age, suggesting that the lie had become an integral part of how she saw herself rather than just a career strategy. This level of deception required constant vigilance on her part, as she had to remember to consistently give the same false information whenever anyone asked about her background or personal history. Schaefer maintained this elaborate fiction about her age right up until her death in 1991, when she was actually 91 years old, rather than the 79 that most people believed her to be, making her dedication to this lie one of the most persistent secrets in television history. Fact 12. Dawn Wells was the only cast member to get rerun payments.
Oh, let me go.
As long as the law, I'm going to tell you.
Let her go.
I wouldn't do that, will you, Mary Ann?
Oh, and what are you going to do about it? Let me out of here.
Dawn Wells, who played the sweet farm girl Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island, was the only member of the main cast who continued to receive money from the show's reruns decades after it ended, thanks to her husband's smart negotiating during the original contract discussions in the 1960s. When the show was first being cast, most of the actors signed standard television contracts that only guaranteed them payment for the first 5 times each episode was rerun on television. This was a common practice in the early days of television because nobody really understood how valuable reruns would become or how long shows might continue to air in syndication around the world. However, Wells was married to Larry Rosen, who worked as a talent agent and understood the television business better than most people at the time. Rosen recognized that there was potential for Gilligan's Island to have a much longer life in reruns than the producers were expecting, so he pushed for a more favorable contract that would give Wells ongoing payments every time the show aired, rather than just for the first few reruns. The producers and studio executives didn't think this would cost them much money because they assumed the show would only run in reruns for a few years before disappearing from television schedules forever. They had no way of predicting that Gilligan's Island would become one of the most frequently rerun shows in television history, airing continuously in syndication around the world for more than 50 years. As a result of her husband's foresight, Wells continued to collect rerun payments well into the 21st century, long after most of her fellow cast members had stopped receiving any money from the show. This made her situation quite different from her co-stars, who missed out on potentially significant income as the show remained popular with new generations of viewers. Fact 13. 4 different boats played the SS Minnow.
Why are you mad at me?
I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at her.
Well, why are you yelling at me?
Because.
That's not a good reason.
Well, it's good enough reason for you.
The famous SS Minnow that carried Gilligan and his passengers to their island doom wasn't actually a single boat, but rather 4 completely different vessels that were used at various times throughout the show's production, each serving a specific purpose for different types of scenes. The first Minnow was a rental boat that the production team used in Honolulu Harbor for the opening credit sequences of the first season, showing the passengers boarding and the vessel sailing out to sea at the beginning of their ill-fated 3-hour tour. This boat had the call numbers GG-1000 and 1 painted on its side, and was returned to the rental company after filming was completed. The second vessel was purchased by the production team and then deliberately damaged to create the shipwrecked look that viewers see in the pilot episode. This boat was towed all the way to Moloa Beach on the island of Kauai in Hawaii, where the crew used sledgehammers to smash holes in the hull to make it appear as though it had been destroyed in the storm that stranded the castaways. For the second and third seasons, when the show switched to color filming, the producers used a third boat called the Blue Jacket for the opening credit sequences that were filmed at Marina del Rey in Los Angeles. This particular vessel eventually ended up for sale on Vancouver Island in Canada decades later, after it ran aground on a reef. The fourth and most interesting Minnow was built specifically as a studio prop at CBS and was designed to literally fall apart on camera during an episode where the professor tries to repair the boat using tree sap as glue. The fake adhesive was supposed to be temporary, and viewers got to watch as the entire vessel crumbled into pieces, with Gilligan desperately holding onto the steering wheel as everything collapsed around him. Fact 14. The original pilot had completely different characters.
I'm not gonna dress up like a girl, and you can't make me. You can't make me. You can't make me.
The original pilot episode of Gilligan's Island that was filmed in 1963 featured a completely different cast of characters that would have made the show unrecognizable to modern audiences, with only 4 of the 7 castaways surviving the transition from pilot to the actual television series. When Sherwood Schwartz first created the concept for Gilligan's Island, he envisioned a group of stranded passengers that included Bob Denver as Gilligan, Alan Hale Jr. as the skipper, Jim Backus as millionaire Thurston Howell III, and Natalie Schaefer as his wife Lovey Howell. However, the other 3 characters were completely different people, with different occupations and personalities than the ones viewers would eventually come to know and love. Instead of the brilliant Professor Roy Hinckley, who could build anything out of coconuts and bamboo, the pilot featured a high school teacher played by actor John Gabriel, who had much more limited scientific knowledge and problem-solving abilities. The pilot also included 2 secretaries rather than the movie star and farm girl combination that would define the final version of the show, with one secretary named Bunny, played by Nancy McCarthy, and another secretary named Ginger, played by Kit Smythe. After CBS watched the pilot episode, network executives decided that significant changes were needed to make the show more appealing to television audiences. They felt that the characters needed to be more distinctive and represent a broader cross-section of American society, so they completely reimagined 3 of the 7 castaways. The high school teacher was replaced by Russell Johnson playing the scientifically gifted professor, while the 2 secretaries were replaced by Tina Louise as glamorous movie star Ginger Grant and Dawn Wells as wholesome Kansas farm girl Mary Ann Summers. The original pilot episode was never broadcast during the show's original run and didn't air on television until October of 1992, nearly 30 years after it was filmed. Fact 15. Traffic noise. Constantly ruined takes.
Nicus Massotatus. Yeah, what a mess. That means, what a mess.
The supposedly remote tropical paradise where Gilligan and his fellow castaways lived was actually located right next to one of Los Angeles's busiest highways, and the constant noise from rush hour traffic created ongoing problems for the film crew trying to record dialogue and maintain the illusion of an isolated desert island. CBS Studio Center, where the outdoor lagoon and island sets were constructed, was positioned only about half a mile away from the heavily traveled Ventura Freeway, which carried thousands of cars and trucks every day through the heart of the San Fernando Valley. During peak traffic hours in the morning and evening, the sounds of engines, horns, and general highway noise would carry across the short distance to the filming location, making it impossible to record clean audio for scenes that were supposed to take place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The traffic noise problem was particularly frustrating for the cast and crew because it created significant delays in the filming schedule, since they had to stop recording whenever the highway sounds became too intrusive. The production team couldn't simply ignore the problem because viewers would immediately notice the incongruity of hearing modern automobile traffic while watching characters who were supposed to be completely cut off from civilization on an uncharted island. This meant that many outdoor scenes had to be filmed during off-peak traffic hours, either very early in the morning before the morning commute began or late at night after evening rush hour had ended. The scheduling constraints created by the traffic noise forced the production to be much more strategic about when they could shoot certain types of scenes, and it often meant longer days for the actors and crew members who had to work around Los Angeles traffic patterns rather than following a normal television production schedule. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved that a show about being stranded far from civilization was constantly interrupted by the sounds of modern urban life.